The first shot didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like fabric tearing, sharp and close, followed by the sudden silence that comes right before panic. In the jungle, silence is never peace. It's a warning. Sergeant Daniel Reyes felt it before he understood it, the ground vibrating, birds exploding from the canopy, the air turning heavy as if the forest itself had drawn a breath. Then the radio screamed all at once. Voices overlapped, words tripped over each other, and somewhere ahead a man yelled, not in fear, but in pain. 280 troops were moving through a green maze they didn't control anymore, and the jungle closed around them like a fist. The ambush was perfect, too perfect. Fire erupted from 3 sides, tracers slicing through leaves and bark. Men dove for cover that didn't exist. The ground was mud and roots and fallen trunks, every step a betrayal. Platoon leaders tried to regain control, shouting orders that were swallowed by gunfire. The enemy knew the terrain. They knew the timing, and they had waited. Reyes wasn't thinking about strategy or escape routes. He was thinking about blood. He was the combat medic, the one man everyone looks for when things go wrong. He had patched wounds under pressure before, dragged bodies out of kill zones, whispered calm lies to men who were dying. But this was different. The calls for medic came from everywhere at once, echoing through the trees like a chorus of desperation. He sprinted forward anyway. The first casualty was a kid from Texas, barely 20, eyes wide with shock as red soaked through his vest. Reyes slid beside him, hands moving on instinct. Tourniquet, pressure, reassurance. You're good, stay with me. Bullets snapped overhead, tearing leaves into confetti. Dirt sprayed across Reyes's face, but he didn't flinch. He finished, slapped the kid's shoulder, and moved on. He didn't know it yet, but command had already tried to call for extraction. The answer came back cold and final. No birds. Too hot. No artillery either. Friendly positions were too close, too scattered. The jungle had pinned them, and the enemy knew it. Reyes kept moving. Every dash between cover felt like running through fire. His pack grew lighter as supplies vanished into wounds and bandages. He found a squad leader bleeding from the neck, clamped a hand over the artery, held pressure until another soldier could take over. He dragged a man with a shattered leg behind a fallen tree, whispering instructions through clenched teeth. He worked until his hands shook, until sweat burned his eyes and his lungs screamed for air. Then the radio crackled with a message that cut deeper than any bullet. We're losing the perimeter. The enemy was pushing closer now, using the chaos, probing for breaks. A burst of machine gun fire tore into a cluster of troops near the center. Reyes heard the screams before he saw the damage. 3 down, 1 not moving. He didn't wait for permission. He ran straight into the open. The world narrowed to noise and motion. Shots hit the ground near his feet, kicking up mud. A round punched through his pack, shredding gauze and plastic. He felt a hot sting across his arm but kept going. He reached the fallen men and dropped to his knees. 1 was gone. Reyes knew it instantly and forced himself to move on. The second had a chest wound, shallow but dangerous. The third, Reyes swallowed hard, was bleeding out fast, femoral artery torn. There was no time. He worked like a machine. Tourniquet high and tight, seal on the chest, fingers slick with blood, heart hammering so hard it hurt. When he finally looked up, a soldier was staring at him, eyes full of disbelief. Thought you were dead, the soldier said. Reyes almost laughed. Almost. The enemy fire intensified, as if angered by his defiance. The jungle echoed with explosions now, grenades, close enough to feel in his bones. A blast threw him backward, slammed the air from his chest. For a moment, the world went white. He lay there, stunned, ears ringing, tasting iron. Somewhere nearby, someone was crying. Somewhere else, someone was praying. Reyes pushed himself up. His arm was bleeding freely now, a deep gash from shrapnel. He wrapped it tight with one hand, teeth pulling the knot, and staggered back into the fight. Every step felt heavier, but the calls hadn't stopped. They never stopped. Hours blurred together. The jungle turned from green to gray as smoke hung low beneath the canopy. Ammo ran low. Men fired in short, desperate bursts. Leaders moved along the line, clapping shoulders, shouting encouragement that sounded more like pleading. Reyes reached the edge of the perimeter just as another wave hit. The enemy surged, shadows darting between trees. A rocket slammed into a position to the left, collapsing it entirely. The line bent, then broke. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like everything would collapse. Reyes stood up into the chaos, raised his radio, and yelled coordinates with a voice raw and hoarse. He wasn't calling for air support. He knew better. He was calling for the troops to rally, to fall back to a defensible rise he'd spotted earlier while dragging casualties. It wasn't much, but it was ground. Somehow, they listened. Men pulled back, covering each other, hauling the wounded. Reyes stayed at the rear, firing when he had to, hands shaking as much from exhaustion as fear. A bullet punched through his shoulder, spinning him around. He fell hard, vision blurring. This time, staying down would have been easier. He thought of home then, not as a place, but as faces. His mother's laugh, his little sister's stubborn grin. The men around him, trusting him with their lives. He pressed his hand to the wound, pain flaring bright and sharp, and forced himself up again. Not today, he whispered. When the perimeter finally stabilized, when the enemy pullback came as suddenly as the ambush, the jungle felt eerily still. The silence afterward was worse than the noise. It left room for the reality to settle in. 280 troops remained alive. They had lost friends. They had lost blood. They had lost pieces of themselves they would never get back. But they had not been overrun. They had not broken. Reyes collapsed once the adrenaline faded. He didn't remember being carried. He didn't remember the medevac bird finally punching through the smoke hours later, rotors shaking the trees like a storm. He drifted in and out, catching fragments, hands gripping his, voices thanking him, someone calling him a hero. He hated that word. Weeks later, when he woke in a clean bed far from the jungle, his arm in a sling and scars mapping his skin, he asked the first question that mattered. How many made it? The nurse smiled softly. All of them who could be saved. That answer followed him long after the hospital, long after the medals and quiet ceremonies. It followed him because it wasn't about courage in the way stories like to tell it. It was about choice, about standing up when every instinct says stay down, about running toward the fire not because you are fearless, but because someone else needs you more than you need safety. The jungle took its toll that day. It always does, but it also revealed something harder to see in the smoke and blood, that one person, refusing to stop, can hold a line long enough for others to live. And sometimes, that is enough to change everything.